I had to think about this one a few times. The Offspring, one of the most heavily emotionally charged episodes of The Next Generation. One that gets referenced so many times later for being something that was a pivotal moment in Data's existence, and so on and so forth. Well, what would you do with that in the TTRPG though? Because you could, in theory, have something like this with Data taking the role of a player. However, that's not the only option you have, because you could have the players being the people who are in the ship's crew attempting to help Data with the problems he's encountering with this. Also, are you going to have an android as a player? Maybe, maybe not. So that's actually the main thing with this one is: are you going to actually have one of your players take the role of Data? Not sure I'd go with that one. But part of the thing with this episode is that what made it so memorable is that it was so heavily emotionally charged with Data and the loss of Lal, because he was, trying to create a daughter and et cetera, et cetera. Which, really, really hits pretty hard. And of course, that's part of the whole logic with this one, is that Lal's origin story, as we see it here, is something where Data doesn't really tell people, because he's not really sure ahead of the time whether or not it'll work. And apparently he was going with the approach of, if it doesn't work, I just won't bother telling anyone what I was doing. And then he finishes Lal before telling people what he's doing. Yeah, that's kind of weird. Seems a bit, irresponsible, perhaps. Anyway, so Lal is played by 4 different actors, mostly Haley Todd. Haley Todd? Haley Todd? I don't know. Yeah, that's actually the same actor. Weird. Anyway, Lal, as an android, is actually has slightly higher capabilities than Data, in theory, anyways. But Data still doesn't understand what causes cascade failure in positronic matrices. And, well, yeah, Lal dies of positronic matrix cascade failure because Data doesn't know how to make a stable positronic matrix. And but that's the crux of the conflict here, is that Data is trying to create something and failing. Now, giving players choices and stuff, trying to help with that would be very interesting. Because even if you do have a player take the role of Data, that's only going to be one player. And part of the reason why I think the other option is better is because when you only have, because the role of Data is played by one person, which would seemingly be easiest as the GM, and then just have the players doing it, unless you're really, really wanting to give one of your players a android child. I mean, you could do that. Yeah, honestly, there's not a huge amount to think about this one, because this was a very, very self-contained episode. This isn't one of those that has huge, far-sweeping implications. It's all about how androids work, what makes Soong-type androids tick. Oh, it's also one of the 2 times in TNG we see an Andorian. Note, this is actually a holographic recreation of an Andorian, but it's seemingly the same Andorian that Picard meets on Risa, which, if that doesn't make sense, that's because Captain's Holiday is a later episode. Same season, though. Makes you wonder why they have what's seemingly the same character in 2 different episodes in 2 different contexts. However, since this is such a minor background character, I don't think the production team cared. Anyway, though, the whole choosing your identity thing, like, okay, sure, as an android, having the ability to choose what to look like is fine and all. The amusing part with that is the sleeping Troy scene, because Troy is there guiding Lal through the process of choosing what race and gender to look like, and Lal apparently decides to go with human. And the process takes so long that Troy literally falls asleep in the holodeck. Uh, Now, will your players feel the same way during the TTRPG session? Hopefully not. Keyword, hopefully. Oh, and of course, Starfleet Command has thoughts and feelings about having more Soong-type androids. Although, given that they've already decided to treat Data as a person, treating other Soong-type androids as people seems like a foregone conclusion. But again, TNG writers didn't like foregone conclusions. They would have plot points about things that in theory didn't actually make sense to be plot points, but whatever. Oh yeah, that's right. They didn't actually name her Lol until halfway through the episode. Oh, and then they have this scene where Lol decides to explore human emotions by kissing Riker. Also, because she's an android, she's literally able to pull him over the bar. Uh, anyway, though. Then, of course, we have the part with cascade failure. Now, this is one of those things where preventing the cascade failure is something that I would probably set up if I was doing this with a series of very difficult skill checks. Skill checks that would be made easier by things the players may or may not have learned earlier in the episode. Give them an opportunity to research how positronic brains work so that their characters can, understand what they're doing. Because one thing that was interesting in the final episode, that something they specifically state, is that Data's attempts at fixing the positronic cascade failure were largely solo. He was the member of the crew who understood it most, and the others just kind of were standing around helping him, which kind of fits if you're, having players do this, because, the players are the ones that are standing around trying to help, and while the, GM does the core of the thing. I have to say, I personally find the way that they did this to be rather strange, but because like the hair texture just feels wrong to me. But whatever. Yes, very, very obviously, um, LEDs swiped out of, standard boring stuff back in the day. But yeah, it's like the whole cascade failure thing. It's like Data didn't know how to prevent it, and he tried to fix the cascade failure as it was happening, and failed. So that's something to consider if you're actually going to try writing this. Is that the secret to making positronic matrices work is to prevent cascade failure, not to attempt to fix the positronic matrix after cascade failure has begun. But anyways, so honestly, this is one of those where it's just like there's a few basic salient plot points where now certain aspects of this could be adapted to something that's not an Android, though, like creating some sort of AI robot that doesn't use a positronic matrix. That, you know, you could do that. Because Star Trek has actually done that multiple times. It's one of those things that found strange about this is the whole emphasis on having a positronic matrix in the first place. Why? Why do you need a positronic matrix when you have all of these other methods of creating artificially intelligent beings that don't use a positronic matrix? Now, I suspect that the in-universe logic is going to be because positronic matrices are better than the other ones, but as has been demonstrated with several things, you don't actually need one. Oh wait, you know what? That's an interesting point that I had actually failed to think of before we started this. Mud's androids and Gort, but whatever. See, the TOS androids um, are part of what made this particularly interesting. Okay, APUs. Actually, APUs from Voyager are actually something that you could rather easily redesign to look more human without actually functionally changing how they worked. Then you have the XO3 androids. Ruck does not look human. The base template form is very non-human, in a similar manner to the way Lal looks before being turned to look human. This form here is seemingly capable of being a person. It just hasn't been completed yet. How exactly this works, good question, I don't know. And that's the other thing with this, though, is that the old one's Android duplicator was designed to take a human and, you know, do that. See, because they made an Android duplicate of Kirk. Looks almost exactly like the original. So much like the original that you could easily mistake it for being a copy of the same picture, just with the image turned upside down and superimposed on itself. Yeah. Oh boy. Anyways, though. Yeah, copying the target's thoughts and memories. That's, again, something that happened in early TNG and TOS, is computers that are able to read people's minds telepathically. This process used a telepathic computer. Anyway, though, if you're doing it with players and androids, you could mix aspects of the XO3 androids in, because the XO3 androids didn't use the same technology base that Soong-types did. Granted, XO3 androids lacked the immense superhuman strength of a Soong-type android, but they were seemingly easier to create. Yeah. That I don't really fully understand, but hey, it's fiction. If you actually fully understand it, then it's not fiction anymore. Oh boy. Yeah, they never explained who the template for Andrea was. Presumably there was one, but we don't know who it was. Anyway, though. Oh yeah, the old ones. Beings whose existence we don't understand. Also, there is the possibility that maybe possibly Ruck looks like one of the old ones, but we don't really know for sure. Oh, actually, that is an interesting point about the old one androids, is that they actually do have limited memory, and if they get too old, they'll become senile and forget their own origins. Yeah, that's amusing. They don't age, though. Ruck knows that he's several centuries old by human standards, but he doesn't really know how old because he's forgotten his own origin. Maybe he's thousands of years old. We don't know. Anyway, though, I got sidetracked on this one. But yes, like having players dealing with android characters in, in this context, you don't necessarily need to stick to the script with Soong-types, because having a player who's an android of some other type is also interesting. At any rate, that's all I can think of for this one. Because, like, again, this is one of those things. It's a very, very personal episode, and that's the number one thing to remember here: is that having players focus on something this intensely personal. Do you actually want to do that? Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. At any rate, I think we're done here. See you next time.